I'm Tracy Ellers, and I'm a mom of two.
I'm Melissa Curtis. I'm also a mom of two.
Today, we're going to talk about the gospel and what it says about food and our food choices, and trying to wrap our brains around what is the best and what works for our families, and how that aligns with the gospel.
We could go anywhere with this topic. And for those of you who don't know me, I've been at Hope for pretty much my whole life. And when our daughters were born, we found out right away that we were all having issues with food. It wasn't right away, I would say, but we definitely have landed in the high maintenance category as far as restrictions and allergies and insensitivities and things. But this book has really opened my eyes to how I can look at food according to the gospel, not just what to feed my kids or how.
Yeah, and before becoming a mom, I was actually a gym teacher. So I've always been fascinated with the human body and food. I was a collegiate athlete. When I'm not pregnant, I enjoy running, so I love to just research and watch documentaries on food and what is the best fuel and how to improve performance. And I like to think I'm knowledgeable, but we all know that everyone has their own biases when it comes to food.
Yeah, as far as our restrictions, they all came with medical diagnoses. Like we started with one daughter, and then myself, and then my husband, and then our other daughter, and it took some years. We eliminated things and added things, and but one of God's common grace gifts to us, I think, is just He put us on a path, and it's not easy, but He hasn't left us. So He's working with us on it.
And I think it's scary if we don't choose one pathway and stick to it forever, or you wonder am I failing my family if I don't do this, or if we eat sugar are my kids gonna have diabetes, or the list goes on. Are we gonna have high blood pressure? Are we gonna have high cholesterol if we eat this way? But we having that perspective that food is a common grace gift, and that we're very privileged in America just to have food and just to have the food choices that we have, so that when we do have dietary restrictions or something, we can easily find it in the grocery store. I know right now I'm struggling with gestational diabetes, and it was just so nice to be able to I need to remind myself that it's a grace to go to the grocery store and be able to easily find some foods that I can eat during this time.
It's interesting how the gospel plays into food, though. I mean, that was a new. I mean, I know the gospel, and I know this, but I really enjoy how this book just kind of brought things to light for us.
The two together, yeah, and just reflecting that God created everything. God created food, and it was good. He even created us in His own image, and we are very good. And in the beginning, we did all things to honor and obey God, because we were created in His image. And because we were created in His image, we didn't have to worry about things like weight or, being too big or too small, or
portion sizes.
Yeah, it was
ingredient lists.
Yeah, it was all just taken care of.
Yeah,
because it was perfect, and it was all good.
God's message surrounding food and feeding our families is different from what culture tells us. He finds more value in what we feed the heart than what we feed the stomach. And that is so important.
Yeah.
Food's ability to heal and nourish our bodies after the fall is limited. I can only do so much with our food list and our ingredients and our things. But it's only Jesus that can heal both the body and the spirit.
Yeah, and I think that's super important to remember, too, because it's so easy to get caught up on well, my way is the right way. This is how everyone should eat. This is the only way, and that's not the case.
It cannot be.
It's different for everyone. It's different for every situation. God created us all different. We all digest food different. There are things that work for some families that don't work for others, just based on God's financial provision. God provides for some families differently than He does for others. So I think it was really impactful that God redeems food.
Mm-hmm.
And he not only created it, but he also, there's no condemnation in eating one way or another.
Right. Even when you have strict diets like we do, we're not perfect all the time. We mess up, and there's always something that's going to happen. And we didn't die. He saved us through it. He carried us through it. We had repercussions, but we learned through it. It's just one of the ways I think he teaches us.
So Melissa, can you just expand a little bit on your family's struggles with food?
Sure. Growing up, I was normal, eating everything, whatever. And then I was pregnant with Abby, our first daughter, and she came into this world compromised. And one of the things that she struggled with the most was her digestion. I mean, it was a nightmare, but she was sick a lot. Like a lot. Lots of horrible diapers, lots of throwing up, lots of developmental delays, lots of more to come in a later chapter on that one. But she was our miracle, and I still call this today, these restrictions are blessings, because once she got a diagnosis with autism, I was able to figure out what we were going to do. God and I, in Barnes & Noble, on the floor, in tears, showed me the right book. And it really just set us on the right path. And we started to really pray about what we're going to do, how are we going to change this. And it really did seem to be food that was the answer. And once we started removing things, we removed like dairy and we removed gluten, and amazing things happened. Her eye contact came back. She could speak a little bit more. It's just been great. But that's kind of where it started. And then we say it had like an upward effect. Then I started looking at my foods and, what would happen if I ate like Abby? And I was able to get rid of all my allergy medicine. I was able to get rid of all of like my indigestion medicine. And then entered Jim, my husband. He also struggles with foods. Well, he didn't think he did, but he had a heart attack. So once someone has a heart attack, they normally go to the cardiologist, and then they put him on medicine, and then, every year he gets checked out. I didn't really feel good about that answer. God did not let that settle with us. And so I took him to another doctor, who was able to look at more things, not just his heart. And we found out that Jim had a lot of other issues, like he had metabolic syndrome, which means he was predetermined for diabetes, high cholesterol, just a mess. But that was the bad news. But the good news is our doctor said it is controllable by diet. So now he's my next patient. So we're still struggling on how to feed Jim and how to feed that. And then enter Lainey 8 years later. We just fed her like we would feed Abby, because that's the only thing that we've known. And I figured if we could save her from having to get rid of these things that have caused trouble in the rest of us, that's even going to be better for her, right? Well, it was for the most part, until she decided to experiment on her own and try a few lunch items from other people's lunches at school. And then all of a sudden we have a medical condition with Lainey. She's having seizures and headaches, and actually passed out, had to call 911. So we had all these tests, all these specialists, all these results coming back negative. Like there's nothing wrong, she's fine. So what did I do? We had to look back at the food. And then she was able to tell us what she had been doing. And we'd ruled out every single specialist except for honesty. So that was a hard lesson, but it happened at the right time. And the way that we just talked to her about it, we're like, you have to be honest with us now, because we have to figure it out, and then you're not going to be in trouble. And then she did. She came forward, and we figured it all out. But we still know to this day, our doctor later had said she was on seizure medicine for like 2 years. And she had to have like the tests with all these leads on her head, and then we had to keep her up for 24 hours because they wanted her to fall asleep. It was just crazy what we had to go through. And it was even crazier to get her off that medicine. But we did finally, and she's doing well. And our doctor, not the neurologist, but our other doctor said there's a definite link between the red dyes and seizures. But not all doctors see it. So I felt like I was, again, kind of swimming upstream because I was going again. I knew in my gut what was happening with Lainey, and when I explained to the doctor, he's like, she's not out of the woods yet. I still want to keep her on the medicine and all these things, which led to a bunch of other problems. Thankfully, we were able to get her off of it. She's doing better.
So it must be a relief too to just have a system that works for you guys
Mhm.
and that works for your
It
family.
was. But I guess when I was, before I even had kids, I thought I had it all figured out. You know, I'm like, oh, we'll just do what I do. We can take her to this doctor and it's going to be just fine. And not the case.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But I still say it's a blessing because Abby's food issues completely changed the lives of mine and my husband and then her younger sister.
I think for me, it's a little different in the sense that coming from a health and human performance background and, you know, watching other people and other runners and all these documentaries and teaching health classes and stuff, I was filled with so much like head intellectual knowledge that I just automatically wondered like, okay, is cancer right around the corner if I eat foods with preservatives, or am I going to be irritable and lazy if I don't stop eating sugar? But the deeper reality was actually more concerning. It's that I had like this fear of food, and I was putting my faith in this functional savior of food. Like, well, if I eat this, then I won't be irritable and I won't be lazy, and if I do this diet, then I'll be this way. And I was putting my faith in this functional savior over Jesus, our real savior.
Right.
So.
It's easy to do because this is something you can see, you can touch, you can control it, you can make changes, you know, you can adapt. But
Well, and we love control.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
and that goes all the way back. Eve loved control too. So, yeah, I think it's often important for us to remember that we are not in control.
That's right.
And each of these things is a grace from God. It's a grace from God that you guys were able to figure out what things are working and what things aren't. And just a grace that God allowed me to see some sin issues that, like, no, not eating sugar is not gonna save you. It's not gonna prolong your life necessarily. It might help, but the Lord is in control,
got those
and
days
He
numbered,
knows. Yeah, He knows when our time is going to end.
I think living under the fall, because we are living under the fall, that we do struggle with those things. Once I figured this all out, don't think I didn't want to tell everybody, but that's not the same for everybody. I realize that's our story. That's not your story or your story.
So, Melissa, how does the gospel allow you to make the food choices that you've made and not feel like you have to convert everyone?
That's definitely something God has been working with me on, and it's come easier probably with age, but in the very beginning it was so hard. And it was also hard because people would come against me. I mean, I'm not the enemy, but they felt like I needed to know that it's really unlikely that this is going to do anything for your children. In fact, my pediatrician said that. I mean, after I had taken her to him every month during preschool, and she would have a snotty nose, and every time they said, you got to take her to the doctor, so she's on antibiotics again, and just every month, what's that doing to her system, right? You know, it's not good. But I finally got brave enough and I said, I think we have to do something differently. This is not a good cycle. I said, I think I'm going to remove dairy from her diet. And he just looked me right in the eyes and said, it's not likely any of that's going to make any difference. It's not likely it's going to change a thing. And so I remember thinking that, and I'm like, I had finally mustered up enough to be like, okay, thank you. And I knew that was the last day that I was going into that office. I'm like, he was my pediatrician. He was not going to be my daughter's pediatrician. And I had to go search other ways. So I think when enough people would say things to me like, as soon as she grows up, she's going to be doing her own thing. And, you know, nice try, Mom, but, you know, it's not likely it's going to work. Just remembering how that made me feel, and that I didn't want to do that same thing to other people. So Tracy, in all of your knowledge and all of the research that you've done on all this food, how do you know have you reached a point where you think you might be taking those preferences just a little bit too far?
Well, I think a good heart check for me is just how much time I spend obsessing about what I'm going to eat and how much and when, and especially during like marathon training season, like, okay, these things on this day and this. But at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, I spent 3 hours planning out these meals and making these date granola bars. And I spent no time with the Lord today.
Mm.
So that's usually a pretty good heart check for
That is
me
a good one.
as to like, okay, am I prioritizing what I'm eating, or am I meal prepping and planning and trying to be organized and in control over my time with the Lord? And if that answer to that question is honestly, which it's sometimes hard to be honest with yourself, you like to make excuses. But like if the answer to that question is honestly yes, then it's a no-brainer. Okay, I need to put this on the back burner for a little bit and spend some time with the Lord. We can come to Him with anything, anytime, and He delights in that constant prayer and communication with us.
Yeah. I remember we were at a restaurant in Chicago, and we ordered the gluten-free breadsticks, and sure enough, they brought the regular, and here comes our daughter just chowing one down, and it was just like, okay, God, protection, we need you to protect her, please. And He did, I mean, had that been another situation at home, she probably would have been horrible, but He just shows up when we need Him to, and
Well, thank you for chatting with me a little bit today about food, and
I'm happy to do it. Thank you for chatting with me.
it's been fun to talk